Hello, friends.
I'm Taylor.
And I'm Brittany. Together, we are two sisters who are here to help you learn some tips and tricks to help navigate this crazy journey called life.
We bring you the perspective of a licensed mental health counselor, aka therapist, and a new mother.
And a slightly eccentric mom of two. When you combine us as sisters, we like to consider ourselves as quite the dynamic duo. So join us as we talk about all life has to offer.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and hit that follow, like, or subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts for updates. You can also see all of our expressions and interactions posted on YouTube channel under Uhane Counseling.
If you're liking what you hear, leave us a 5-star review. It helps us know what content you like and spreads the love to others to get resources and help for their mental health. All right, friends. So we just want to start with a quick disclaimer. Today, we are talking about suicide prevention. So we want to give you the warning that this subject can be highly sensitive and triggering. So please be cautious when listening. All right, Tay, let's dive into this. September is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. So we want to talk about how to talk to your loved ones about this.
Yes. Hopefully this is a good resource for everybody. It's never a fun subject, but it is a very useful subject. And yeah, I think it's a good one to talk about. So the way that I was taught to approach these conversations came with a quote, and I've never forgotten this, and it kind of freaked me out when I was going into therapy. But my professor was like, therapists are people that are willing to walk and talk where angels fear to tread. And when I first heard that, it terrified me. Like, what does that mean? And having done this job now for, I've been in the field, I think 10 years now, and being a therapist for over 6, yeah, he's right. Like this stuff that we talk about and the stuff that we deal with in sessions is humbling, and it's an honor to be a part of, but it is also something that you can't go in afraid of. You have to be prepped to be able to take it. And I think that's where it's okay to have a healthy amount of fear of it, and a healthy amount of respect for it, but don't be afraid to say the words suicide, death, fear, because there's an empowerment behind being able to say it. It's almost like Harry Potter, where you can't say Voldemort's name, but then everyone says he who must not be named. But then Dumbledore's like, it causes fear in the fear of the thing itself. It reinforces it by not even being able to state the person's name. And I think that's what's happened with suicide over, decades of people not understanding it and people not being able to honor and respect what actually happened. And like you look at I just think of like Poe and Emily Dickinson and like all of these iconic, like
Sylvia Plath, we've talked about that before too.
Yeah, like founders of and they toil with these dark concepts. Like Poe is known for like struggling with it, and Plath is, and all these people, and they almost romanticize it though. And I think that's where it's interesting. It's almost like romanticized or it's demonized, and there's not really anything in between. Like it's just one or the other, and you can see how it's progressed through generations and how it's talked about. And I think that's something to think about. Like, how were you taught to talk about it? How were you taught to view it and see it? And is there a possibility that there's a hole or something that could be differently presented? And that's where I really liked where my professor was like, we walk where angels fear to tread. Because we're defying what has been expected of us, and we're willing to go into those areas, but still handle it with this grace and this compassion. And I think that's the balance that we're looking for and trying to help you get today.
Yeah. And it's so, I remember the first time when I had really had to interact like personally with suicide. I was in high school, and one of my dear friends was going to attempt suicide and had written a letter and all this. And I remember in that moment being like, where do I go? Right. Like, because it all was either so dark or so light. Like there is no, like having to kind of go in that middle ground to help this dear, dear friend of mine it was hard. It was really heavy. Right. But I'll never forget that experience because it was that first time where I feel like I had to kind of tread into that. So let's
think about too, like you were so young to navigate, but this is
16. Yeah.
But think about like how many of our teens are navigating this with their friends, because the friends are usually who they go to first. And that's where like my teens are in the front lines. And if they don't have anybody model this for them or have this conversation about how to approach it with them, how overwhelming is it for us at this age and for our comprehension and our understanding of the world, and something so um so hard. It's a heavy, heavy thing to understand. And if we aren't
Yeah.
able to teach them and model this for them, they are the frontliners. As much as we don't like it and don't think it's appropriate for their age development or whatever, it's like
They're gonna deal with it either
tough.
way.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like
Like,
tough.
my
It's gonna
parents
come
wouldn't have
up.
picked that for me, right? Like, or our parents,
I
but, like,
definitely wouldn't. Yeah.
yeah.
I
But
wouldn't
at
pick it
that
for
moment,
anybody.
I
Yeah.
had to be there for that friend. Like, that
Yeah.
was one of my dear friends. I had to be there. Like, yeah. Mhm.
And I think that's the thing is like, you don't pick it, but I'd rather they're educated and empowered instead of fearful and unaware, you know. And
Mhm.
that's where I think that's where more collateral damage comes from. Is like, let's educate them on how to be able to handle it and how to trade it off to somebody else like me who can handle it, who has been
Exactly.
trained to take it,
And where to
and
know
then they
kinda,
get
like,
that
where to
relief.
draw that line. Like,
Hmm.
that was a hard thing for me to be like, "When do I need to step back? Where do I need to step back?"
Hmm.
Like, this isn't mine to save the friend, right? Like,
But
even though I
all my
felt this
teens take
burden.
it that way. All of
Oh,
them.
it
They're
and
like,
I
"This is
remember
my
feeling that.
job."
"This is
Yeah.
mine. They came to
Yeah.
me. I need to be the one to save them. Like, if they die, this is on me." That was heavy. That was so hard,
Yeah.
right? And in
Yeah.
that moment, like, so I guess let's dive into this for a sec. Like, how can we talk about this and approach such a difficult subject? How do we model this as parents and as role models for our teens? Like, how do we talk about this and approach it and model the behavior?
I think the word that I always loved was honor. Because when you honor something, you respect something, and I always think of Mulan with that, like, not trying to make something super
Moving
light, but
on to us all.
but,
Yeah.
like but look at the concept even in something as basic as Mulan of what honor means. Like, she went and pretended to be a guy in the army in a very unsafe time to fight for her dad, to bring honor to her dad so he could still maintain his title. Like, honor means such a beautiful thing of you respect, you encompass, you value, right? This
Mhm.
experience, you value this thing. And I think that's where we have to honor what this person's going through. You have to honor the fight. You have to honor
Love that.
like what they're tired of. And the best thing, and I have this like vision in my head because I deal with this all the time, right? And um it's a battle. Like, it's they're in a battlefield every day fighting demons. And if you've seen like any of those movies, like, I don't know, Game of Thrones or like all those ones that people know where you're fighting like the bad things, right? We've
Yeah.
all seen something like that. Disney even, like,
Like Batman. I don't know.
yeah, whatever it is. But like, people have these unseen fights that you don't know of, and think about how heavy and exhausting that is every single day to tell yourself to keep going. Every single day
Yeah.
to say, combat these thoughts, combat this darkness that is so gripping and heavy that you can't even explain it to somebody. Like, this is where, and like, you don't have to have depression to do this. Like, there are many, many reasons why suicide comes into a person's mind, which is interesting because when I was telling my husband we are going to do this, he's like, well, you can go through depression. It's like, depression's not the only reason why suicide like presents for people, though. It can be a
Yeah.
wide range of reasons.
Yeah.
Um,
I think, like, some of
and
the other ones I've learned as in, like, an adult are, like, perfectionism, like, I feel like that's come
uh-huh,
in, or just
OCD.
feelings of guilt, trauma,
Hmm.
OCD, like, some of the friends that I've known that have dealt with it since I was 16.
Hmm. Not being good enough.
Oh, yeah, and
um,
and if I go back to that root
Complex
core.
PTSD. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
there's a lot that adds to this, you know?
yeah, and I remember talking to this friend too, who luckily did not complete suicide, and they're still around, and I remember talking to them recently, and we had discussed back to that trauma, right? When they were 16, 17,
Mhm,
and, um, and it was interesting because at the time we all had pinpointed it as depression. But
mhm,
now on the other side, there's so many other factors
mhm.
that we can say, "This is why you were feeling the way you were then." Like, we can look and see that now. Like,
Yeah,
and this is interesting too to think back, like, I wish that I had not used some of those phrases, like, "It's not that bad, you've got this," or I wish I hadn't said that. Like, I wish there was, but the
how would you
empathy.
have known?
How would I have known that? But
How would
okay,
you like, this is the thing, like,
but I think if we model this for our kids, like, now to have more of that empathy and that development, right? Like, for our teens, I don't know, like, would that be helpful to teach them, like, here's some other keywords you can say, or here's some other,
mhm.
like,
I
because now
think
I can approach it
it's
totally different, like, reflecting on something that happened almost 20 years ago. Well, I guess it did happen 20 years ago. Like, I'm old. But, yeah, It's
Well,
interesting.
I think the key is terminology matters, and how we talk
Mhm.
about this, how we bring awareness to this issue, um, how we understand this battle, and how we understand people's emotions and people's struggle. And I think the minute that if you can teach people to understand, like if you look at over history, like even the word choice that we use, like on this podcast and even in my like vocabulary, Matson asked me once to my husband, he was like, why do you say complete instead of committed? Committed
Yeah,
is a word that has been used for you committed suicide since forever. It's just a
forever.
societal
Yeah.
word, right? And then completed is a very different meaning, right? You take committed and completed. Committed is saying that you did something wrong. Like it's a judgment.
Mhm.
It's saying you committed a crime. You did
I was just gonna
something.
say that, yeah.
It has a
Or
negative
that that's the only
connotation.
thing that your life was committed to, or like,
Yes, it's
this
like a
is your
very
whole
one
purpose.
tracked.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, like that's all that encompasses. And
Yeah.
you people take it so like and it was actually illegal, and I think it still is in some, I don't know, like to complete suicide. And so like, okay, well, let's just add salt to the wound to the family, where not only are you like you lost your loved one through a really sad way, but like now they're bad people that completed a crime, and they end
Yes.
their life being murderers to themselves, like air quotations around the word murder, because it's like,
Yeah. Well, from a
what?
Christianity standpoint, that is totally what is
You're going to
that is the
hell.
way it is talked about. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
do this, you're going to hell. You
Yeah.
committed this, it's murder, and that is not true.
Society
Like,
took that on,
yeah.
though. Yeah, so it's
Mhm.
not only is it, like, Christianity or religious, it's societal as well, and that's where, um, I think if we can even start our base language of, like, completion, they lost the battle,
Mhm.
and that just makes you wanna cry. Like, every time I think about it, it's like, "Oh, that's so"
It's
I'm
so
pregnant too,
sad.
so but it's hard to watch, people get beat up day after day, and people not respect that battle, you know? So when I have people like actually come in and be so close, it's not even like a, I think people are so scared sometimes to come in and be like, um, I knew this podcast was gonna make me cry, sorry.
I'm
But
sorry.
no, it's fine. I'm pregnant too, so it happens more. But
But
this
this
is
is
what
one
the
of those that, like,
sessions
we
are
need to
like.
talk about, yeah.
Yeah, this is what my sessions are like, is we mourn together. Like, I'm so sorry. You're taking a big hit. You're tired, you know? And that's where I think people need to understand, that's what people need, is for you to not pity them, but to feel with them. You need to say,
Mhm.
you got this. Like, keep going, but I can be the help that keeps you going. And I think that's where I'm sorry, but that's where your conversation needs to start going towards. Is it's not you're doing something wrong, you're so selfish, I can't believe that you're thinking about this. It's no, think about it, and like they're exhausted and they are so worn down. How can I just help you keep just being here, and I will fight your battle for you until you can get
Mhm.
back up, you know? And that's where that's what we need to start teaching. Not and I think when you start teaching that, your terminology totally changes for
I
everything.
think so. Yeah. I like that perspective, and just being there to see as a support to help somebody who's going through this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think um I mean, there's no way that you can go through this job and not have a humility about this subject. Like, this is a pretty heavy one, and I think for me, it's, when you view it as an honor and when you view it as a moment to be somebody else's fighter, you tend to be a lot more humble about it and a lot more
Mhm.
willing to do things. So, that doesn't mean it's your burden, though, and I think that's the hard part
Yeah.
too, is people then think that's your burden, and your burden is not to take over the fight. Your burden is to sub in and then go back out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you can't finish the
Totally.
battle for them. That's not appropriate either. They need to finish their own battle. Um, your job is to model and to show them how to be able to continue forward.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Thanks
does
for
that
that.
make sense for terminology and subjects? So sorry, I told you I was
Yeah.
going to cover this one,
No,
but
it does make sense, and I remember shifting that at some point in life, probably because you or I don't know where it was, but yeah, to go from committed suicide to complete, and like, it really has changed. It really has changed a lot in my head. So I've appreciated that lesson.
and I think there's this thing too, because on the other side, like when you talk about it, And everyone's like, that's so selfish that you could leave. That's so, and like, it's okay to acknowledge the other side of you're a loved one and you want to be there for these people. You want to support these people, right? And you will
Mhm.
miss them and you do love them. And like, that's good to acknowledge, but don't shame. There's a difference between shame and guilt, right? And like, sometimes guilt is a useful tool. Like, there's been some sessions where I literally am like, okay, do you know I'm here for you? We're making this plan, but you gotta remember you're gonna screw me over if I trust you right now to go home, and I have this plan where you go home and I don't send you to a facility. Right. And this is a hard
Mhm.
judgment call as a therapist as well. Use the parents to 24-hour watch them. But it's like, if you somehow find some way to do something, think about what's going to happen to my life and our relationship. We have this bond. This is
Well,
why I'm
and you can
trusting
do
you.
that. Yeah, you can do
I
that
can do
in
that.
a trusted,
Yeah.
like, you're their therapist. Like, but that would not be appropriate. Like, I have a close friend at this point whose daughter has been in and out of facility, and that would not be my place to say something like that, right?
No.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I
You have
think
to use,
knowing
but
that
that's where
it's
you have to know
okay.
your balance of where you
Yeah,
lie and what your relationship is. And again, that's a deeper technique that
yeah,
you have to know where it lies. But like, just really think about, as a parent, as a supporter, as a friend, like, your job is not to guilt or shame. Your job is to simply help them fight a battle. How do you fight a battle? You empower. You don't like point out all the flaws or say that's a really bad idea, right? You just go like,
mhm,
okay, we still have to keep fighting though. So how are we going to fight? How can I help you fight? That
yeah,
usually helps people better track into something different.
okay, and that's helpful. Let's talk about some of these, like, high population groups that are at risk. I know we've mentioned this before in past podcasts, but I think it's probably been a year since we've talked about this subject.
Yeah. So it's
Been a
interesting
bit.
because 2020 really changed these stats. Um,
Yeah, I just was noticing that too.
yeah, no, because I mean, I was taught all these before COVID. COVID happened, and I was a new therapist and stuff, and came out of grad school and everything, and yeah, it really changed it. So the suicide rate now is increased 36.7% from 2000 to 2018, but then you tack on till 2021 in studies, it's increased even more. We had
Mhm.
significant increases in attempts as well as completion during that time. Um, did you know that like living through a pandemic now is one of your child adverse scores? So there's ACE scores,
Okay.
adverse child experiences or something like that. And it's for complex trauma to be able to rate the level of amount of experiences that were traumatic in the formation years of your life.
Okay.
Um, and there's like 10 questions. They added living through a pandemic as another one because it was that bad.
Yeah. It was that bad. Yeah,
It
I've
was
seen
bad.
different stats coming out recently for just different things like suicide, loss of faith statistics. I mean, there's just so many different,
Anxiety
like,
has tripled. Like,
oh my
you look at
gosh,
everything and
depression
everything
and
has
yeah,
tripled. I'm like, oh, this is
yeah.
horrible.
Number of children on like anxiety and depression medication
Mhm,
pre-COVID versus
mhm.
post. I mean,
Yeah.
I just started bad therapy recently
Screen
too, so that's
addictions, technology
yeah,
addictions, like, addictions skyrocketed. It's bad. It's a hot mess, peeps.
yeah.
But the populations I was taught about the most, actually, which surprised me, are elderly, are extremely at risk of completion due to the stage of where they are at in life. So the likelihood that they will actually complete, not just attempt. Attempt is usually higher in like teenage years because they're more impulsive, but they don't actually
Mhm.
manage to complete because they just pick the means that aren't, like, there's a lot of variable factors. I'm not trying to get
Right.
ideas, so but
Yeah.
um so adolescents, of course, are always kind of in this grouping, but people with disabilities and elderly are extremely high for completion as well as for attempts. Those are like the highest population, and middle-aged men.
I was just gonna say, I was like, weren't middle-aged men on there too? I wasn't seeing it on here, but I remember
Yeah,
seeing
this is new
before.
stats. So like they're saying now, like disabilities and elderly, I think that there's been a lot more work around assisting middle-aged men. So I think
Mhm.
that's really good. So maybe that population is lowering a bit in risk. But I think that's really
Hopefully,
interesting
'cause that
because
was
if
a
you,
scary stat.
yeah, I think it's really interesting because geriatrics, like, I don't, I have never worked with anybody over the age of 75. even 70.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, yeah,
And
I
it
don't
could be
know.
a
I don't know
generational
the
thing though. Like it could be
100%. I'm very young and I look
yeah.
like I'm a child. So like that could be it.
Oh, that
But
like that paired with like what percentage of that generation would be open to actually going to therapy?
but that's the problem.
Yeah.
Is they are the elderly right now. So like how many of them are actually seeking assistance
Yeah.
and treatment and how
Like
many of
our
them are
generation is
like
way more prone to therapy than anybody has
100%.
ever been. And as
100%, but
parents,
that's
yeah.
that's a part of the problem is that
Yeah.
that's still a very strong niche of people that are not getting help that we need to be
Mhm.
aware of. So like and they're very lonely, like think about so many endings and so many things passing. And I think disability is really interesting too because a lot of people find a lot of hopelessness and a lot of isolation in that group as well. So um just groups to be aware of. If you're also like other ones in that like risk zones are LGBTQ plus or minorities. LGBTQ plus have dealt with a lot of like I don't even words went out of my head for a second. My help me out. What?
I don't they're really vulnerable. Like it's a
Prejudice.
very
Prejudice.
prejudice. Yeah. Mhm. I was like, I don't know
Like
where you're going with this, but it's
I
a
was
very
like they
vulnerable
it's a
population.
very vulnerable population. So just know like
Yeah.
especially adolescents and LGBTQ plus a super hard time as it is and then having that like on top of it there are definitely more at risk and veterans because of PTSD.
Yeah. So let's talk about warning signs real fast. What are some warning signs that we can look out for loved ones, whatever their age range is, right? Like what are some just
Yeah.
traditional warning signs? Not that this is the end all be all. Everybody's different,
I was like, this is such a
but
hard I
and
mean,
that's why I feel like it's
I
even
put
bad to
this
even
on here.
say this.
I know
Like,
this is I think instead of giving specifics, this is what I'm gonna do is it's a vibe, guys. Like,
mhm,
and this is the best way I can sum it up. And there have been some times where I ask some clients, totally not even with the list that I have pulled up here, and I'm like, "You got a vibe that's off. You're suicidal right now, aren't you?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay." Um, if you feel it in your gut, just ask it, right? And the worst that can
yeah,
happen is a conversation comes out of it, like, "Well, why would you even think that?" Or like maybe they're offended, but I would rather people are offended than I didn't catch something. I would rather,
yeah.
like and
And I do
that's
remember
a
offending a
healable
family
offense.
member before. Yeah, like I'd asked a family member before, and they're like, "No, why would you even ask me such a thing? Like, I'm fine." I'm like, "Well, all right, but like, you sure about that?" Like, yeah,
But like
better to ask and to show that you care
yeah.
than and even if they were in denial, I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's where at least it's bringing up a conversation that you can have with somebody about a difficult time. And if it not, then it's a really good modeling of like I'm here for you and I want to know what's going on with you. Like you seem like something's off then. And you can go into a
mhm,
conversation deeper that way. So I think that's what I want to leave you with for like if you feel it, say it. Like that's the best that I got you. Now some of my parents are a little over zealous and think everything is. So start using your teen or your kid as your radar. They could just be having a bad day. That doesn't mean they're suicidal. Like,
yeah.
and
Well, it's
that's where,
interesting thinking
yeah.
back to the friend in high school. Like, this friend had all of the stereotypical things that were everything was pretty good, right? Like,
Mm,
there wasn't anything that you could pinpoint to be like, "Oh my gosh, they stopped showering," or, "Oh, they're pulling away from all their friends," or anything like this. Like, there wasn't all of
yep.
that at that time. It
Yep.
it just wasn't there. So, like, if you like, your parents are funny, like, some of it could be, if they are, like, not showering anymore or they are losing interest in friends, it could just be that they're having a really hard time, like, with hormones and
Yeah.
they want
100%.
my little guy
Honestly,
today
yeah.
told me he wanted to be stinky for the rest of like, he's like, "I'm showering once a month. I'm gonna be a stinky boy," like my 8-year-old, like, I'm not gonna be like, "Well, your lack of grooming means that you're suicidal." Like,
You're
it
just
yeah.
dramatic.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
just dramatic and decided you don't like the soap today.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah. I think that's where like the signs are so all over the place. Um, use your gut instinct, but don't overuse it. My husband
yes,
always
I
says
love that.
my radar is way off when I'm pregnant because I'm so emotional and so empathic that I overly read. but usually I'm really good when I'm not pregnant. So just know, like, if you range on the overly read into things, and maybe pull back slightly. Like when I'm pregnant, I always have to pull back by half and be like, okay, I need to like give myself some time before I actually call this one out. Um, Usually at work stuff, it's fine because I'm not as emotionally attached like him. You're mad at me. No, I'm not mad. I'm sitting here like watching a show.
Yeah.
You're mad. Like, so if you tend to range that way, maybe give it a second, take a beat, and then come back and see. But I think that's probably the best advice I can give you for warning signs, more than like the list. The list is such a mixed bag, guys. I mean,
I know, I'm like looking at it and it's like, this is not always true.
I think
Like,
a third of the time it's true, a third of the time it's not true, and a third of the time it's a mixed bag of they've showed signs at different points and other points
yeah.
not, like, and
Well,
that's where
like
it's like,
one of these warning signs on here is verbal cues of unhappiness. Like,
mhm,
okay, I probably had verbal cues of unhappiness today when I was
mhm,
fighting my son to get ready for church. Like, that doesn't mean anything, you know?
mhm.
Like, it's, yeah,
It's got to be a
it's,
lot of clues all together.
yeah.
But again, if you're having an open dialogue with your people, then hopefully they can come to you with it, or hopefully you
Mhm.
can have a good enough awareness of how they've been feeling lately that you can go and ask them.
I like that. Let's dive into that a little bit too. Like, you have this acronym here that says CARE. So
Yes,
this
this is for people having conversations.
yeah, so let's dive into this. Like, let's say that you want to have a
Yay!
conversation with somebody who you feel might be suicidal or who has said to you like, "Hey, I'm having ideation or I have attempted." Like, let's do this. Mhm.
Yeah. So you're going to use care in your mind. So the first thing is communicate. When you communicate, you need to create a safe space and you need to listen, not listen to respond. Brittany, what does
I
that
do
mean?
that. Listen to listen means that you actually are hearing what somebody is saying. That instead of just like being like, "Oh, I hear you. Let me give you all these solutions. Like, I got all these answers." Like, you're actually like reflecting on what you're hearing, you're summarizing what they're saying, and you're asking clarifying questions. Like, you have a desire and intent to understand, I
So
think is the biggest difference.
let me give you an example. With my
Okay.
husband, he's long-winded sometimes.
What?
With him. Yeah, he
Yeah.
says, yeah, he's like, "You are the word person." No, 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 Madison, you have a lot. So I tend to be like, "I heard the first sentence. We're good to go, buddy. I got the point, right?" And I just go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and then I like move on to the conversation. He's like, "No, let me finish my thought." Like, but I already know what your thought is, and I don't need to finish the long-winded explanation. And this has been our point of communication we're working on. But with clients, I let them finish their whole thought and then I will go and be like, okay, that's what they meant. Cause I want to make sure that I'm not interpreting anything different than what they want me to interpret, right? Like, it's funny, my husband, I
Mhm.
can just jump ahead and be like, I already know what he thinks. I already am assuming what he thinks because I know
But
this
you have a
man
different
so
relationship.
freaking
You know
well.
him inside and out. Yeah.
Exactly. Versus clients, I'm like, I need to make sure I understand how their brain processes things and functions. So you can see a very different mindset going in based off relationships already. I am listening to listen with a client, and I am listening to respond with my husband. So, with our family members, it's very easy to be like, I know how they think, I know how they process. Like, they said this one line, and we're just going to go on that. No, 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 no. Like, they listen the whole thing through to make sure that you fully comprehend what they are saying. You can reflect what you hear back. You can take the reflection of meaning, the reflection of the statement, either one. Like, it sounds like you're feeling this, or it sounds like this is what you're saying overall. Summarize what they've stated, like, oh, you are having a really hard time and you're really lost right now. It sounds like you're really tired. Those are the two
Yeah.
skills combined together, right? Ask clarifying questions, but be cautious in how much you ask. Like, nobody wants to be berated by questions. Nobody wants to be interviewed or interrogated.
Right. Yeah, there
Don't
is a good
ask
balance to
questions.
that.
There's yeah, this is meant to help you get to the next spot. Like, well, can you tell me more about like you say you're done. Like,
Yeah.
I just need to fully understand what does done being like mean, right? What does that mean
Mhm.
to you being done? Because to me it could mean something different. Um that's a good clarifying question instead of being like yes, no's. Don't ask a bunch of questions. It becomes
Yeah.
berating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and don't jump ahead. Like, that is something that,
Don't try
like,
and fix it.
our family does great at catastrophizing too. So,
Yeah.
like, to try to ask questions like, let me jump 10 steps ahead and like ask you these questions. Like, don't ask clarifying questions that are going to cause more trauma.
Yeah, like, just let them get through their thought, stay on that point, and you don't need to go and try and fix it in the moment because, again, there's a lot of healing that happens in the process of exploring the thought, right?
Hmm.
Like, sometimes just getting it out there, verbalizing, exploring the thought is really what they need, and somebody else to know that they're struggling, and that's, like, a lot of the journey, right?
Yeah,
They don't need you to sit there and be like, "This is what we're gonna do, we're gonna lock you down," all these things, like, just just listen. It's okay.
yeah, I like that. Okay,
That
what's the
is
A
number
for in
C.
care?
Not number C, letter C. Um,
Number C.
number C. A is ask direct, compassionate questions. So don't be scared to talk about this. Be open, talking about the subject. Never, talking around a subject like never helps anything. So like if you're beating around the bush, come on, dude. Like what good is
Hmm.
that going to do? It's name it, move on, and let it be a part of it, and then be compassionate. Like remember, this is somebody's darkest moment and biggest um, it, think of the word honor. Like you are an honor to hold this very difficult moment. So when you're asking your questions, be aware of that, respect that, but don't be scared of it. It's a weird
Yeah.
balance because it can
Yeah,
get
and I was just
daunting
thinking that
too.
too, like, yeah. But if
Yeah.
someone's confiding in you about something like this, like they are extremely vulnerable. They're at their
Mhm.
lowest point, right? Like, what an honor to have somebody trust you with that information.
Yeah. And I just
It's
had to
yeah.
think I had to think about it too for a second. Like, don't be something you're not. Because if people are coming to you with your talk, like pattern of talking, a lot of the people like the way that I talk of like it's blended. Like I'm still talking about normal life in there. Like I've thrown in Mulan today, and I've thrown in like a ton of other crap, and in a really heavy subject. Like we are still human beings with the same
Mhm.
personality, and you know what? I still crack jokes. Like because that's just my personality, a part of it. And you're talking to me so remember when you're asking direct compassionate questions like be you. Be how you conversate. Be like loving, like in the process. And that's going to help the process unfold a lot better because then they get to be themselves. They don't feel like they have
Yeah.
to talk in robotic professional ways. They get to talk, this is what I'm thinking. This is pretty
Yeah.
crappy. Yeah.
And I think that if you talk to somebody, if you stay real, like if this is someone you've already had a relationship with, right? I'm guessing if they're going to open up in such a vulnerable way, like keep that they expect that from you. Like they
Mhm.
expect you to be you and you expect them to be them.
Yeah. The
Like don't
weirder
put
you
on this new facade. Yeah, like all of a sudden they put this thing up and you're like, "Oh, don't let her talk to you." Like that's not yeah.
yeah.
Like don't be that person. Just be normal.
And if it's hard, then name that it's hard. Like if you're
Yeah.
feeling an emotion, name your emotion because they're gonna sense that. So like don't pretend like it's not there in the room. Like, yeah, I am nervous or I'm uncomfortable or this is really heavy or I don't quite know what to do. Like you guys
And
are on
that's
a
okay to
journey to
verbalize that.
yeah, 100 you should. Like
Yeah.
you're on a journey to figure it out together, and that's
Yeah.
where the more that you can create a journey and a partnership, the less manhandled they're gonna feel, and the more that they're gonna feel like you guys are figuring it out as a team.
Yeah. It was interesting too, like on a different side note, but I had gone to a therapy session with my son, right? And I remember talking to the therapist on the second half of the conversation, and that's usually when we talk more like parenting stuff. And I had said, like, this like the feelings he is expressing make me uncomfortable, and I know that I shouldn't be uncomfortable with that. And he goes, pause. He's like, you are
Yeah.
allowed to be uncomfortable. Like, just because you know that you're like, okay, like maybe I should let
Yeah.
my son express himself. He can do whatever he, is thinking and what all of this. He's like, no, like you can
Mhm.
express that you are uncomfortable and you can express that to your child to be like,
Uh-huh.
hey, when you're saying these things or when you're doing these things, it does make me uncomfortable. It makes me scared. It makes me sad. It makes me upset, whatever that feeling may be.
Yeah.
So if we're able to do that with a young child, why wouldn't we be able to do that with somebody else? And I think
Mhm.
that it was a good reminder for me to be like, I am allowed to still have my own emotions in response to somebody
Mhm.
else's. So if someone's talking to you about this, you are still allowed to feel your own emotions. You are still allowed to feel sad or I mean, disappointed to some level or whatever, scared, afraid, whatever that might be,
Mhm.
feel it. Mhm.
But you know what's really cool? I've had just a few sessions like this, and and their sadness was my sadness because I loved these clients so much, and it brought us to this bond. Like
Mhm.
they were done, they were exhausted, and they were just fried. And I think the moment that I was like, I'm really sad and I'm mourning with you, was the moment that they were able to feel sad for themselves, because they couldn't feel
Mhm.
sad for themselves because they thought they shouldn't or whatever. And I think bringing in your emotions can sometimes help them bring in their emotions that are so buried because they're so heavy. Um, it creates a really beautiful moment, especially if you have that deep, deep bond with that person, where it creates this really amazing bond that I didn't, yeah, I didn't think about.
Yeah.
So bring
Yeah,
yourself
I
in.
love
It's
that.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it shows that next level of compassion, right? So if you're already asking
Mhm.
compassionate questions, like, in this point, you're going to show your compassion for this person. Like, "I am sad and I am scared because
Yeah.
you're sad and scared." Like, it
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. That's
Yeah.
part of the beauty of humanity, even in dark
Yeah,
moments.
I think that's the thing though. Like that's what we're talking about here is like, um I don't know why this came to mind, but like all the literary like things that we love and idolize and have made a part of our culture, and all these media things usually are honored because they touch the deepest part of our humanity. They touch our emotions. They touch this
Mhm.
story that is so difficult to understand but so beautiful at the same time. And I think these conversations can be that. They're beautiful, but they
Yeah,
are hard. And the more that you see them as a beautiful thing that you can respect, the less demonized they are, and the more that you can help.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
All
I
right.
love that.
R. So care. If we're going through care, we've done the C, we've done the A. Now it's R. Respond to warning signs and provide support. Like it's just like the airport people. If you see something, say something.
I like that. Yeah, you gotta respond.
I don't know if I have anything, but I like the perfect analogy, and I've used this so much with my clients lately, which is funny. But now that I have a 1-year-old, and they all like, especially my teens, are like, "How's your baby doing?" Like love it. But I'm like, what would you do if you saw like Banks was sitting on the ground the other day? It was a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden he flopped over. He was playing with a
Yeah,
basket of bags, and for no reason he just flopped over head heavy, hit his head, and started sobbing crocodile tears. So sad. And like I always ask my clients after that story, I'm like, what's your instinct? Like, and they always look at me crazy, like, go pick him up and hug him and like help him. Like, but you can't take it away. He fell over, he hit his head, it's done. Right? Like, and they're like,
yeah,
but I can soothe him and make him feel like loved. That's what we want. So if you see
mhm,
something, say something, like respond, guys. Like it's, if a child gets hurt, what are you going to do? You can't take things away. You can't take the scrape away, but you can soothe and love. That's
yeah.
what we're doing
I
here.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, that's all we're doing. It's a very
Okay.
basic concept taken such a basic way. Like that's such an instinct for us to go pick up that little kid hurt.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't we do that emotionally?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's because it's so taboo and scary, and everybody wants to mind their own business, but that's why we're all here, right? That is we're all here to lift each other up. We're part of the human family. Like, let's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could go on a whole rant, but I stopped myself. Okay, E, our last one for care.
Encourage professional help and follow up. These are very, very heavy subjects, and you can see like it's a journey for all of us to navigate and support. Again, we are very trained on this one. And that's why you need help, guys.
Yeah.
If this comes into anywhere at any time, you put them with a professional immediately. Like you don't just say it'll maybe go away or anything like that. The fact that they were there at some point means that they need somebody there to help them. And
Mhm.
that's just a straight up fact. If their suicide comes out, you put them with somebody to talk, because we have a lot of tools to help them, and we can
Mhm.
like we will tell you then like the level of severity of it, and we will tell you what to do and how to like support them. Do not be the one to decide that. That is ours. We are very trained on it. Just go to a professional. It's just easier.
Yeah. It
Don't
is.
even don't even like mess with this. I've had lots of people like in my personal life come up and ask me these things, and I'm like, if that word comes out at any time, put them with a therapist. Like, just
Yeah.
you don't want the heartache of the possible like you read it wrong. That's our
Hmm.
job. Um, put them with somebody else.
Yeah. And like, one of my girlfriends, like, she had said how much easier it was just to, she needed the help. She needed that professional
Mhm.
help. So then that burden wasn't all on her, right?
Yes.
Like,
Oh yeah.
at a certain point, it's, you can't keep owning the responsibility for all of this. Like, she's like, I needed to be able to sleep at night. I needed to be
Yeah.
able to like leave my house. I needed to be
Yes.
able to do this. Like,
That's what
and
people
that
don't
was so
understand.
good of
Yes.
her to realize this. Like, she saw the benefit of encouraging professional help and follow
Mhm.
up, and it's better for her and her child.
Mhm.
And that was so heavy and so hard, but so grateful that she realized that.
Yeah, I think people have a lot of this concept too, because I even thought of like the postpartum mommy shame. Like, I didn't breastfeed or anything like that. And I definitely got some flack for it. I think, the situations where like there's an expectation of I should be able to do this or I should fulfill this role. And I think um why? Let somebody else take that burden from you and give you permission to not have to carry that burden around, you know? And this is
Mhm.
one that it's such a tricky call. And there have been multiple times where I come home to my husband and be like, sure as heck I made the right call. And he's like, you have a lot of training, Tay. You know what you're doing, and I am the one with tons of training, tons of experience, tons of conversations like this, tons of supervision, like, and I'm still on the side of like, did I do the right thing? And
Yeah.
that's where you don't need that burden. Go to somebody trained because it's not worth it. It's just not,
Yeah.
it's
It's
not worth
not.
it.
It's not.
No, you're not doing anything wrong. It's not that you're not capable. It's not that you're not good enough to handle it. It's that you don't need to go through that battle and carry it because it eats you alive if you aren't trained properly to carry it. And you can even
Yes.
see like this. I don't know the last time I cried in a podcast. Um, but you can see how hard it is for even us to carry it and how much of it, like, this is a special, special subject in my heart because I think of all the people that I helped carry through this. And I'm like, it was dark and it was heavy. And there's times where I've been in my office, I'm like, this, like, crap, man, like, it was like a dark, dark day. And I had to pull myself out, or I had to pull, like my dog is my savior at work.
Yeah.
You just go to a professional.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
just
and
go.
I think it's like I am not a professional, right? This is Brittany, but I am not a professional at this. And I do remember one time I had a friend come to me that she had attempted suicide and was having ideation and all this, and she had come to me to try to discuss things, right? And in that moment, I kind of had to set a boundary because I was like, I am not equipped to handle this right now. Like, this is
Mhm,
bringing up too much trauma in my own life. Like, her situation was a
mhm,
little more paralleled with some of my life, and I was like, I can't handle this. And
mhm,
that was one where I had to let go of that burden and encourage that professional help. So I'm giving you that permission too. If someone comes to you and you really just find yourself not
mhm.
in a place to deal with this, like, put yourself first, and that's okay.
And it's not
Like,
even like
that's
first or second, it's
not first or second, but
acknowledging.
like, I don't know how else to say
And
it, but
no, I know, but
yeah.
I think this is where like people really struggle, and I think this is where we all have different jobs, guys. We all have different
Hmm.
roles. Like, if you think about even in like if we're using the battle analogy, even in the infantry, like there are different roles for different reasons. Like,
Exactly.
let people do their job and you do your job. And you can be like,
Yeah.
I think of all those like military guys, World War II, and like all the army dudes. Like, I don't want my best buddy giving me like medical attention when the med is right there and he actually knows what he's doing and I'm
Exactly.
bleeding out. Like,
Exactly.
no, you
Yeah.
go fight your battle, you go keep yourself safe, and I'm gonna go get help from the dude that can actually fix
Yeah.
me. And that's where I think just use that analogy. Like, it's your role as a parent, your role as a friend, your role as a supporter is support and to love and be their community, be their support and be their loves,
Exactly.
but don't
Exactly.
be their battle person. That's my job. That's another
I love
professional's
that.
job. Like, we are taught to fight this specific fight. And it took a long time to learn how to fight this fight, and we're still learning it. But like, we are taught how to fight this fight. Let us fight that fight while you go and love them, because I need somebody to love them. Like,
Yeah.
and that's what I tell all my parents. I'm like, please just go love them. Just like whatever makes them happy, you go do that. That's your job and you do it great. Go do your job, I'll do mine. And that's what I'm saying. So if this like comes at all out, give it to us and then we'll tell you what to do.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, you have a few resources here for help. We will post these on our Instagram and on the website.
Yeah, just remember suicide prevention line. I think it's 999 now.
Mhm.
You can call or text 999. That's
Perfect.
my like one standings advice that I have for you. There's also like apps like BetterHelp and Talkspace with therapists. And they're fine. Like they have good tools. You know, therapists are available 24/7, I think, on that one. Because they're located at different locations. And then hospitals, you know, you can check in. Hospitals are a double-edged sword for me.
You
They
know,
help
I was like, oof.
and don't help. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a love-hate relationship with those. But you know what? If it's keeping you from doing anything crazy, then you go. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to use the resources, especially like 999. It is anonymous. There's no shame in using it.
I think the one thing that I do want to make sure, because I forgot to put this somewhere else in here, but so we'll put it in now. When you're having these conversations, don't ever guarantee confidentiality. Don't ever guarantee you're not going to say anything to anybody. Guarantee that they are safe and loved. Guarantee
Mhm.
that you have their back, that you're going to help them. But then, like, when we're talking, I was like, I have an obligation to keep you here. That's my job. And I know our
Yeah.
jobs may not line up right now. I know you may have a different goal than my goal, but that's my goal. So I'm going to do whatever it is to keep you safe. And you can be as mad at me as you want, but I'm willing to take that hit and that hate if it means that I get to see you again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And that's
Mhm.
where, like, don't ever promise that. I never
Yeah.
promise that this
And I
conversation
learned
is
that
that
pretty
this
on.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My disclaimer too, as like not as a therapist, but if teens are talking to me, right, like friends' children or kids from church or wherever this might be, I'll be like, my caveats are if you are harming yourself or you're harming others, doing hard drugs, I have to tell. Like, and they know this.
Yeah.
Like, you can
I
tell me
mean,
anything
that
you want,
sounds like
but
that's
it's
very similar to our therapy intake. If you hurt yourself or somebody else, someone that's minor disabled person, you know, like that's, yeah.
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 And I'm like, there are certain things like you're gonna have to share it. Like we're
People
trying to
matter.
protect you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My job is to
So
keep people safe, and that's what we will do. So I would just say don't promise anything.
yeah, don't promise it. Just give them that caveat up front. And they're really good about it. Like teens are really good about like,
They understand,
okay,
they
so if I
know.
tell you about this and you're gonna have to tell my mom, yeah, I'm probably gonna have to on this one. Like that's yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's not meant to discourage. Like, I sometimes too, even like you have always a safe space to talk. And then afterwards, we talk about like, you're really not in a safe place, and I really need to keep you safe.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
And this is heavy. We know this is heavy. But hopefully it's a good resource for people, especially if this is something that you're working through with a loved one or even yourself. So yeah,